The only reason humans still exist is because no one's figured out how to kill them all at once. The Council of Galactic Affairs, a sprawling assembly of representatives from the myriad species in the galaxy, buzzed with an uneasy energy. Today, a new member was to be inducted. Humanity, a species that had recently clawed its way out of its home planet's gravity well and onto the galactic stage. Most were skeptical, a few were curious, and some were downright hostile. After all, humanity's reputation had preceded them. Zuro, the imposing representative of the Karthan Empire, a warlike and ancient race known for their strict codes of honor and martial prowess, had the unenviable task of addressing the assembly first. He took the podium, his leathery skin glistening under the artificial lights, and his deep, resonant voice filled the chamber. Esteemed representatives, he began, his tone dripping with disdain. We stand on the precipice of a grievous mistake. Allowing humans, these unpredictable and dangerous beings, into our midst is a folly we cannot afford. A murmur spread through the assembly. The Karthans were not known for hyperbole. They were warriors, their words often as sharp as their blades. Zuro continued, I will recount a tale that exemplifies the peril of our decision. It is a story from our recent past, a grim reminder of why humans are dangerous. He paused, casting a long gaze over the room before continuing. It started on a nondescript planet in the Outer Rim, a world known to its inhabitants as Terranova. The Karthans had long sought to expand their influence in this sector, and Terranova was a prime target. Its resources were plentiful, and its strategic location made it invaluable. The humans, however, were a relatively new presence, having established their colonies less than a century prior. When the Karthan fleet arrived in orbit, they expected a victory. Their ships were superior, their technology more advanced, and their soldiers battle-hardened. The humans, it seemed, were hopelessly outmatched. A formal declaration of war was delivered, a formality more than a necessity, since the Karthans believed the outcome was already determined. Captain Elias Grayson of the Terran Defense Force stood on the bridge of his ship, the Vigilant. The Karthan ultimatum had just been broadcast, and the mood among his crew was grim. They knew their chances were slim, but Grayson had no intention of surrendering. He turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Markham, a seasoned veteran with a perpetually stoic expression. Markham, give me a direct line to the Karthan flagship, Grayson ordered. The lieutenant complied, and moments later, the formidable visage of Zuro filled the screen. The Karthan warlord's eyes, cold and unyielding, met Grayson's with a look of contempt. Human, Zuro intoned. Your resistance is futile. Surrender now, and perhaps we will spare some of your people. Grayson leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Warlord Zuro, you may outnumber and outgun us, but we are not so easily cowed. If you want this planet, you'll have to take it by force. Zuro's eyes narrowed. So be it, he said, and the screen went dark. The battle that followed was unlike any the Karthans had ever faced. The humans fought with a tenacity and ingenuity that defied logic. They employed guerrilla tactics, striking from the shadows and disappearing before the Karthans could retaliate. They used their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, turning the planet itself into a weapon. The Karthan soldiers, accustomed to direct and honorable combat, were unprepared for such an unconventional war. In the midst of the chaos, a Karthan officer named Drath was captured by the humans. He was brought before Captain Grayson, who treated him not as a prisoner but as a guest. This puzzled Drath, who had been raised to view humans as little more than savages. Over time, as Drath observed the humans, he began to see them in a different light. They were fierce, yes, but there was a camaraderie among them, a bond forged in the fires of adversity. They fought not just for survival, but for each other. One night, as Drath and Grayson sat in the dimly lit command tent, the Karthan officer spoke. Why do you fight so fiercely, human? You must know you cannot win. Grayson looked at him, a faint smile playing on his lips. We fight because we have no other choice, because we value our freedom, our way of life, and because deep down we believe that even in the face of impossible odds, we can find a way to prevail. Drath was silent, contemplating the captain's words. There was a fire in these humans, a resilience that was both inspiring and terrifying. It was a quality that Zuro had underestimated, and one that could not be easily extinguished. As Zuro concluded his tale, the assembly hall was silent. The representatives who had once viewed humans as little more than an upstart species now saw them in a new light. They were dangerous, yes, but not for the reasons they had initially believed. Their danger lay not in their technology or their numbers, but in their indomitable spirit. And so, Zuro said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words, I implore you to reconsider. Humanity is not to be trifled with. They are a force unlike any other in the galaxy. To admit them to this council is to invite uncertainty and chaos. But perhaps, just perhaps, it is also to invite a strength that could one day save us all. The assembly was left to ponder the Carthan's words, the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, on Terra Nova, the war raged on. The humans, battered but unbroken, prepared for the next assault. In their hearts burned the knowledge that their fight was not just for their survival, but for the very soul of what it meant to be human. And in the darkest of times, that knowledge would be their greatest weapon. The ground trembled as the Carthan war machines advanced, their metallic forms glistening under the harsh sun of Terra Nova. Captain Grayson stood at the forefront of his troops, binoculars in hand, surveying the battlefield from a makeshift command post. Around him, the men of the Terran Defense Force prepared for what seemed an inevitable clash. Sir, they've breached the outer perimeter, Lieutenant Markham reported, his face a mask of grim determination. Grayson nodded, lowering the binoculars. They want us to fight on their terms, he said, but we'll make them regret underestimating us. The humans had been pushed to the brink, resources stretched thin and numbers dwindling. But their resolve remained unbroken. Grayson turned to his officers, his voice carrying the weight of their collective will to survive. Markham, coordinate with the artillery units. Focus on their supply lines. We need to disrupt their logistics if we have any hope of stalling their advance. Yes, sir, Markham replied, snapping a salute before hurrying off to relay the orders. Drath, the captured Carthan officer, stood nearby, his expression inscrutable. Despite being a prisoner, he had been given a degree of freedom that perplexed him. The humans treated him with a respect he had not anticipated, allowing him to observe their strategies and even participate in discussions. It was an experience that had begun to erode the rigid prejudices he had held. Captain Grayson, Drath said, stepping forward. I still do not understand why you do not simply surrender. The odds are against you. Why prolong the suffering? Grayson met Drath's gaze, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Because surrendering isn't in our nature. You might see it as stubbornness or foolish pride, but it's what makes us who we are. We fight because we believe in something greater than ourselves. Drath pondered these words, a seed of doubt growing in his mind. The humans were unlike any enemy the Carthans had faced. Their strength lay not just in their weapons, but in their unyielding spirit. As night fell, the battlefield was illuminated by sporadic flashes of artillery fire. The Carthans, confident in their technological superiority, pressed their advantage, but the humans fought with a ferocity born of desperation and hope. They utilized the terrain to their benefit, launching ambushes and hit-and-run attacks that kept the Carthan forces on edge. In the midst of this chaos, Drath found himself reflecting on his own people. The Carthans prided themselves on their martial prowess and strict codes of honor, but the humans had shown him a different kind of strength, one that was fluid and adaptable, driven by a fierce determination to protect their own. During one particularly intense skirmish, Drath was thrust into the fray. The humans had been ambushed, and Grayson's unit was pinned down by Carthan soldiers. Without hesitation, Drath grabbed a fallen human soldier's rifle and began returning fire. His actions were instinctive, driven by a newfound respect for his captors. Grayson noticed Drath's involvement and shouted over the din of battle, "Drath, fall back. This isn't your fight." Drath shook his head, his resolve firm. "It is now," he replied, continuing to fire at the advancing Carthans. The skirmish was brutal and brief. The humans managed to repel the attackers, but the cost was high. Casualties were mounting, and the strain on their forces was beginning to show. As the smoke cleared, Grayson approached Drath, his expression a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "Why did you help us?" Grayson asked. Drath lowered the rifle, his eyes meeting Grayson's with a newfound sense of purpose. "Because I've come to see that your fight is not just for survival. It's for something more. I don't fully understand it yet, but I know that I cannot stand while you face annihilation." Grayson nodded, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Then let's make sure your choice wasn't in vain. We have a war to win." Days turned into weeks as the battle for Terra Nova dragged on. The humans, despite their dwindling resources, continued to resist with an almost supernatural resilience. The Carthans, for all their might, found themselves embroiled in a war of attrition that was taking a toll on their morale. Drath, now fully integrated into Grayson's unit, became a valuable asset. His knowledge of Carthan tactics and technology provided the humans with a crucial edge. He had come to admire the humans' resourcefulness and camaraderie, traits that were foreign to his own people. One evening, as the human forces regrouped in a hidden base deep within a forest, Grayson called a council of his officers. The situation was dire, and they needed a plan that could turn the tide of the war. "We can't keep fighting them head-on," Grayson said, his voice weary but determined. "We need to strike at their heart. If we can take out their command center, we might be able to break their will to fight." Drath stepped forward, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I know where their command center is located, but it's heavily fortified. A direct assault would be suicide." Grayson considered this, a spark of an idea forming in his mind. "Then we won't attack directly. We'll infiltrate. A small team with the element of surprise can do more damage than a full-scale assault." The plan was audacious, bordering on reckless, but it was their best chance. As the officers dispersed to prepare, Grayson and Drath remained behind, discussing the finer details of the mission. "Are you sure about this, Drath?" Grayson asked, his tone serious. Drath nodded, his resolve unwavering. "I've seen enough to know that your cause is just. I will stand with you, Captain, until the end." Grayson clasped Drath's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "Then let's show them why humans are dangerous." As the night deepened, the small infiltration team prepared to embark on their perilous mission. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. The fate of Terra Nova, and perhaps the future of humanity, rested on their shoulders. And so, with a mixture of hope and determination, they set out to do the impossible. The team moved under the cover of darkness, each member attuned to the silence of the night and the rhythm of their own breath. Captain Grayson led the way, followed closely by Drath and a select group of elite soldiers. The plan was simple in theory: infiltrate the Carthan command center, disable their communications, and eliminate key leaders to create chaos within the enemy ranks. Drath's knowledge of Carthan tactics and defenses proved invaluable as they navigated the treacherous terrain. They avoided patrols, bypassed security systems, and silently took down any sentries unfortunate enough to cross their path. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the enemy's operations. As they approached the command center, Grayson called for a halt. The imposing structure loomed before them, bristling with defenses and surrounded by vigilant guards. Grayson turned to his team, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is it. Remember, our primary objectives are to disable their communications and take out their command. Once that's done, we signal the main force to launch a coordinated attack. Stay sharp, and let's show them what humans are capable of. The team split into smaller units, each assigned specific tasks. Drath led a group tasked with sabotaging the communications array, while Grayson and the rest focused on breaching the command center. With meticulous precision, they moved into position. Drath's team reached the communications hub, a sprawling network of antennas and transmitters. They worked quickly, planting charges on key points and hacking into the system to ensure maximum disruption. As Drath set the final charge, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. Once an enemy, he now fought alongside the very people he had been conditioned to despise. The thought was both humbling and empowering. Charges are set, Drath reported over the comms. Ready to detonate on your mark. Meanwhile, Grayson and his team had infiltrated the command center. The corridors were eerily silent, the air thick with tension. They moved with lethal efficiency, neutralizing guards and avoiding detection. As they neared the central command room, Grayson signaled for his team to prepare for the final push. With a swift kick, Grayson breached the door, his team fanning out to cover all angles. The Carthan officers inside barely had time to react before they were cut down by precise, controlled bursts of gunfire. Grayson approached the command console, planting a device that would override the system and broadcast a false signal to the Carthan fleet. It was a bold move, but it would buy them precious time. As Grayson prepared to detonate the charges, he caught Drath's gaze through the comms feed. "Now," Grayson said, and in unison, both teams triggered their explosives. The sky lit up as the communications array was destroyed, sending shockwaves through the Carthan forces. The command center was thrown into disarray, and the human forces seized the moment to launch a full-scale assault. The tide of the war had shifted. Back in the council chambers of the Galactic Assembly, Zuro sat in silence, watching the events unfold on his display. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had struck at the heart of the Carthan war machine and crippled its command. The Carthons were in disarray, their forces scattering as chaos spread. Zuro clenched his fists in frustration. How did they? It was then that Zuro realized the true power of humanity, their ability to adapt, to surprise, and to fight not just for victory, but for something far greater. And in that moment, the Carthons, for the first time in their history, had encountered a force they could not conquer. Humanity had shown its strength, and the galaxy would never be the same again.